We have our fourth of four, not finalists, final interview of the first round. And we're very happy to welcome Miss Maysam Alie-Bazzi.
Perfect.
Maysam, did I say that?
Maysam.
Thank you.
Yeah,
I'm
thank you.
sorry I was collecting myself a little bit. We wanted to begin by introducing ourselves. And so we did, get to shake hands a moment ago, but we thought we'd give you a chance here in a second. And I will kick off by saying I am a mom of three. I've lived in Northville for about 15 years, and I have a 12-year-old in one of our middle schools and a 10-year-old in 5th grade, and I have a kiddo who is in 2nd grade. And we've also gone through our early childhood ed, so we're really working our way through the entire Northville system. Jim, do you want to?
Sure. How you doing? My name is Jim Mazurek, treasurer. I'll do mine differently this time. Lived in Northville area 31 years roughly. 2 kids. My youngest finally graduated last year. She's now in college.
Congratulations.
Love the district. I've been on the board for, this is my 10th year, and I jokingly say it, I'm the old man of the district, and I hate that being the case. The wise man.
We need 3, don't we? 3 wise men. There you go. Okay.
Hello, I'm Roland Wong, and I've been a Northville resident for 33 years.
Okay, good job.
And I've been on the board for 7 years. I have 2 kids that have gone through the Northville schools from K to 12, and they're now in grad school. So
Nice to meet you. Thank you.
good to meet you.
I'm Mcintyre. This is my first term on the board, 2nd year. I've got 3 kids in the district, 2 in high school and 1 in an elementary school. And he started in the elementary ed or the early childhood program as well.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you for being here. Congratulations on the success that you've had. A very impressive background and resume, I have to say. I'm Lindsay Wilson. I'm born and raised in Michigan, and we have lived in Northville for 10 or 11 years. I have 4 kids that have touched the school district here. Right now, they are at Ammerman Elementary, right here at Hillside, and at the high school. Now I'm in the 2nd year of my first term. I love being on the board. It's a really great honor. I love being here. So thank you for being here.
Thank you so much. Very nice to meet all of you.
Before we go to Ms. Lynn on my left, we have one of our board members who is Zooming in. So Ms. Jafer, can you introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, Maysam. I'm Angela Jafer. And although we may have some common roots in common, I actually attended Fortson High School long before you were ever principal there, because I'm way too old for that. But I look forward to meeting you on a professional level as well. I too have lived in Northville a long time, almost 20 years. I have 5 children who have attended or are attending Northville Public Schools. I'm a local business owner and obviously a board member. So that's my professional side as well.
Wonderful to meet you. Thank you.
And just for public who may be joining us, Ms. Jafer can't be here. She's worked really hard to try to make that happen, but has accommodated us by joining by Zoom. So we thank her for that. Ms. Lynn?
And I am Suzanne Lynn. I am in my 4th year on the board, my first term on the board. I am the unique one who does not actually have children, but has been in public education since I graduated from college, and have been in the Northville area in Northville for 12 years now. So excited to have you here today and ready to dig in.
Yeah, we're definitely excited to have you, and thank you for your time. We thought we would begin by asking you to just tell us a little bit about yourself, maybe take 3-5 minutes, something like that. And of course, we've seen your resume, but for members of the public who many of them aren't with us here in the room, you could introduce yourself.
Sounds good. Thank you so much for this opportunity to come before you, the board, to interview for the superintendent position. I have so much to tell you, so I will keep it short and then work in anything I didn't get in later throughout the evening. I also want to thank everybody that's Zooming and joining us and everybody in the audience here today as well, especially my current superintendent, Dr. Glenn Maleko. Thank you for being here and thank you for his attendance. I'm a firm supporter of public education and public service, and I've worked for Dearborn Schools for 23 years. I have a few degrees. My first degree is communications, public relations, University of Michigan, Dearborn, also a reading specialist master's, University of Michigan, Dearborn. Wayne State University, I earned my library information science degree. And I also have a teaching certificate from Wayne State University. We are blessed to have so many local college universities nearby, great ones. Dearborn Schools, I'm the executive director of staff and student services. Dearborn Schools, so I oversee human resources for a district that has 2,700 employees, and student services for 20,600 students. And I am involved in all the top leadership decisions, non-instructional and instructionally, and I'll share how both components of education brought me here today. I graduated in 2018, I graduated from the Michigan Leadership Institute, SUPES Academy. And since that time, I never pursued I was not following superintendent vacancies. I was not looking. I was often encouraged to do so. When I learned that Northville had been posted, I got excited. I had the emotional reaction that you're supposed to have when you're truly interested in a community and in a school district. And I knew that that was my sign. This is your time to research the district. And so that's what I did. I began immediately researching the district. As you know, I attended a few board meetings, and it was a very positive experience. And so that brings me here to you today. I started as a teacher, thanks to my mother's influence. I was a teacher. I taught 7th grade language arts for 6 years. And what made me a great teacher I had highly engaging lessons. I differentiated, I challenged students, and it wasn't that made me such a great teacher. It was truly my ability to motivate. I realized I had this ability to connect with kids, and I could motivate them, through our relationship. And not only did I realize that was my greatest strength as a teacher, but now 20 years later, I can tell you that's one of my greatest strengths as an adult as well, and as a leader in education. After teaching, I was asked to become a media specialist. At the time, I had just finished my library information science degree. I was not ready to leave the classroom. I smiled. I said, yes, thank you so much for the opportunity. I said all the right things. And then I got in the car and I felt emotional because I wasn't truly ready to leave the classroom, but I knew, hey, it's another opportunity and you don't say no when you're asked. And so I went, and it was such a great experience. I was in 6 buildings over a 2-year period. And during that time, I had the opportunity to present professional development at the building level, at the district level, and then also at the state level. So we presented at conferences such as Boys and Books, at the MABI conference. And then also I had the opportunity to observe and learn, experience 6 different leadership styles and see how the culture and the climate in each building was. You know, I had only 1 building experience, and now I met all these different people throughout this huge district. I could observe what worked really well for some of the leaders and things that I would probably do different, even though at that time I wasn't necessarily looking at my next steps yet. After 2 years as a media specialist, I became a literacy coordinator at Fortson High School. It's a K-12 position, so you were servicing literacy and you were doing all this instructional work for K through 12, but I was housed at Fortson High School. During that time, when I joined that team, it wasn't a great time to join the team. There was some division among staff. There were things going on. And so I knew that when I got there as a brand new administrator, I really had to focus on the relationships, because most of what I was doing was directly with the adults in the building. So it was staff professional development. It was developing, working with the steering committee for the school improvement plan and the title report. And at that time, Fortson had just gotten $1 million budget for the first time, but we know what responsibility comes with spending $1 million with a whole bunch of rules and guidelines that you have to follow. And so a lot of what I was doing at that time had to do with the adults, and really by the time I left Fortson, I had a really solid relationship with the staff. Also, after about 2 years in that position, I was asked, would you please become the assistant principal, apply for the assistant principal position? I did not. I wasn't dying to implement the student code of conduct. You know, that's not something you're excited to give consequences to kids. However, that experience was so essential in everything else I did, because it taught me the balance of this kid's in front of you. He's got to leave you feeling that he is still a wonderful kid, that he or she is a great person, and that great people make poor choices, and what can we learn from those? And so I learned to take a restorative approach to discipline, into also delicately navigating, making the parent feel value and heard and understood and empathize with with the parents. And then also, of course, our teachers. Teachers have to feel supported, and they must get the support that they need and they deserve. And so at that time, I wouldn't say I mastered it at that point, but I learned walking the tightrope of leadership. And then also it put me in a much better position. So when I became a principal, I effectively trained the APs that then worked for me, because I knew what they were going through, and then I could empathize with them. And then I knew, hey, these are the lines you have to use. This is what helps a teacher feel supported. This is the extra communication you have to do, because if there's a breakdown here, then there's going to be a breakdown in what the teacher feels and perceives and what the parent feels or perceives. So then I went on to become the interim principal at Woodworth Middle School. That's 900 students. At Woodworth, I started the school year. So I was interim for a few months, and then over winter break. So I'm going to just say, this is a little long. I'll make sure my closing is short. I did time it, so I'll make sure I make up for this time in the closing. So at Woodworth, I started the school year. Well, I joined during winter break. And so I emailed the building and I said, they found out I was the interim principal. I said, I'm home all of winter break. I'm going to be at the local coffee shop on these 2 days. Anyone who wants to come sit down with me and have my undivided attention, just let me know. And I filled up time slots for 2 days because it was a large staff, probably like 60 teachers and non-instructional staff and anyone that wanted to. And so that gave me, I wasn't given like, here's the school improvement plan or here's the emergency plan. So everything that I collected about the building was from the staff. And then that gave me time to understand what was important to them. So fast forward, I officially go through the application process. I get the position. And before the school year began, I hosted the school improvement steering committee at my house. Food always helps, right? And outside in the summer weather. And so I met with the teams regularly. So I met with the school improvement steering team. I met with the MTSS team every week we met. I met with the bilingual team, the advanced opportunity team. So I met with everyone because I wanted to make sure I was tapping into and maximizing everybody's expertise. You know, there's that saying, I might butcher it, so I'm going to paraphrase, but it's a quote. You know, I hire you to tell me what to do, not so that I can tell you what to do. And so I thought it was really important that the teachers all understood that I knew that what their expertise was in, and that we use that to give our kids and our building the best possible, meet the best possible standard. After the time at Woodworth, I moved on. The late state superintendent, Brian Whiston, was our superintendent at the time. He moved on to become the state superintendent. Dr. Glenn Maleko had been in my position, my current position at the time. He moved on to become our superintendent. And then I applied for the current position that I'm in, and I moved on. And so now the Woodworth family, they're still my family. The staff is very near and dear. Some of them might be watching right now, near and dear to me. There were some staff challenges, and that's at Woodworth. And that's what made me recognize that I was interested in human resources, because I could have never told you 3 years prior that, I'm interested in human resources. So now I get the executive director job in my current role, and it brings me here to you today. The last 7 years plus has really prepared me to be an aspiring superintendent. And I know that right now is the right time, and the experience that I have that I'll share with you throughout this evening, hopefully will illustrate those experiences to you as well. I am involved. I oftentimes serve as acting principal in Dr. Maleko's absence. And so I even had the opportunity to call a snow day. And that was pre-COVID. So pre-COVID, that was like a really big deal. I don't know if it's really a big deal anymore, but it was fun. It was 5 a.m. and my whole family was up and everything went well. So I guess that's a true test of serving as an acting superintendent.
Thank you so much. We are going to a little bit toss the ball around and let everybody have a chance to ask you different questions. And so I'll begin by asking Miss Lynn if she will take over for us.
Yep. So given the changing dynamics of public education, what do you see as the most critical issues in the next 5 years?
So absolutely, I mean, there's so many. So if I'm thinking about kids, I'm thinking about like directly kids. I'm thinking about their emotional well-being. If I'm thinking in terms of the organizational system of public education, it's absolutely funding. Right now, there's currently legislature on the table that could divert millions and millions of dollars. That's going to increase 20% each year and redirect those dollars to charter schools, which will absolutely negatively impact public education in districts throughout Michigan. So funding would be my number one. Maybe I don't put these in priority order because they're all pretty important. I do believe that teacher retention and teacher morale, our teachers need to be recognized. And I know, kudos to you in the Board of Education and the administration here. I did observe the recognition that went on, and it was wonderful, and it was heartfelt, and it was genuine, and that's really what it has to be. That's across Michigan, and it's across the nation, the teacher morale and teacher, and therefore the teacher shortage. And so recruitment and retention is going to be huge, and it's one of our main challenges in the next 5 years. So I believe that it's essential that that the superintendent and the leadership keeps a pulse on all the legislature that's coming and going, whether it passes or not, because it's an indicator of what's to come for public education. So those would be my two.
And sorry, a quick follow-up. And when you think about those, and you named a few, what role would you play with those?
Well, thank you. Okay, so I was thinking this, but I didn't want to go on and on. Okay, so advocacy is essential. And so I'm so blessed and fortunate because the last 7 years I have had the opportunity to develop a network of advocacy. So I know where to go to have, if you look at the 90-day plan, that is actually one of my goals, advocacy at the state level. And if you look at those pictures, which you don't have to look at the pictures right now, but there is a picture of our state legislatures that we meet with in our district, either bi-monthly or tri-monthly. And that gives you a direct line, a network to the people that are voting on issues that impact public education. And so keeping that network alive and well, and I did look up who your state legislatures are. So I know like Gary Peters would be one. I know Debbie Stabenow would be another. And I have all the names written down, but not memorized. But that would be a priority for me. And then also it's having the network within the Wayne County RESA, the superintendent group. So I was just there recently in Dr. Maleko's absence, and we had Bob McCann with us from K-12 Alliance, and that's a policy group, education policy group. And having him, knowing him and having him on speed dial is a wonderful resource to have in terms of advocacy. And then also, educating, so I'm jumping around. So K-12 Alliance is one. I'm also planning on going to the K-12 convention conference in Detroit. It's coming up in May. And so that's a full day learning about, that's giving you an opportunity to access lobbyists and tell them our perspectives and tell them our positions on what impacts our district the most. I also believe that, so with the advocacy, so we talked about K-12 Alliance, we talked about RESA. Of course, Michigan Association of Superintendents and Administrators. They also have active lobbyists. I'm a member. I didn't say this earlier. I have co-presented at several of their conferences, and they offer quite a resource, several resources to network. And I think it's important with advocacy that it's just not one person doing it. It's that we're educating our community on how they can help, and educating them about what is the true intent behind different policies that are out there. As far as teacher retention and recruitment, As I noted earlier, what you are currently doing. Now, I will tell you, part of what attracted me to Northville, so I'm coming from a district with 1,400 teachers. And I've been there 23 years, but I still meet someone new every single day. And so when I did my research and I saw, oh, wow, there's 450 teachers, like I could truly get to know 450 teachers. That is attainable to me. I used to pride myself on learning all my students' names within like the first week of school. So I don't know if I could still learn everyone's names, but that over time, that's so attainable. And so I really believe that the personal connection and that you are listening, and you're not just listening and nodding, that you're present and you're truly considering the feedback that teachers and staff, and I mean non-instructional staff as well, but for now I'm speaking to teacher retention and recruitment. And so it's that relationship that makes people feel valued. It's also the recognition. It's the 4 teachers that you honored here from Hillside the evening that I joined. It's thank you cards, and yes, handwritten notes. It's stopping by and saying, hey, thank you so much for coming to the open house at Northville High on Sunday. I know that was a Sunday that you could have been with your family. Oh, and there was a snowstorm. There was a snowstorm that day as well. And so that's how you make people feel valued. And of course, you train your leaders to do so as well, because the reality is that the building leader is who's going to have those relationships. And so the training and the work that we do for administrators, but don't forget, we also have to keep recognizing and valuing our administrators as well.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. I'm going to hand it over to Ms. McIntyre.
Thank you. If you were chosen to be superintendent of Northville Public Schools, the #1 district in the state of Michigan, what would be your vision for further improvement in the next 2 and 5 years? And how will you set out to get others to buy into that vision?
So I'm gonna answer the question backwards. So I'm gonna say, how will I set out to get others to recognize the vision? Is that, the first year, of course, we talk about the first 90 days, but really, truly, the first year is priority number 1 is going to be getting to know people, allowing them to get to know me, giving them opportunities, being there, being at the casino night. No, I'm joking. Being at the Ammerman Craft Show and visiting buildings, having it on your calendar to have regular meetings with the leadership team, with the administrators, with chatting with the superintendent, for parents and community, but also for staff, and visiting buildings as much as possible, making them as purposeful as possible. So that's another, you have 12 programs, 11 buildings. And so to me, I'm like, I could do that in 1 week. I could have that many meaningful visits if I spent a half a day in each building or whatever was needed. So getting people on board, and with the parents, getting out in the public and making sure that the chatting with the parents is truly a chatting with the parents, that it's just not yes, but it's truly listening and considering what they're sharing with you, because they're sharing it with you. They're sharing with you what matters to them most. And so it's truly listening to the parents and then taking that back to the team and looking at what can we do to make this better. So as far as the vision goes, so that's how I would implement. That's how I would get people to follow and buy into the vision. As far as the first part of the question is what would be the 2?
2 years and 5 years.
2 years and 5 years, what would be your vision for?
Okay, so the first 2 years would be, of course, instructional. So the proficiency and the growth rates are amazing, and to know that Northville students are performing the same right now as they did pre-COVID was amazing to me. And so it's never settling. So we're here. How are we going to raise the bar even higher? How are we going to continue to challenge our students and to make sure that we're offering them post-secondary options? And so I would say that building on all the amazing advanced programs that are already offered, but never settling there. And so post-secondary relationships and partnerships with the universities would be something that I would like to see happen between 2 and 5 years. Hopefully sooner. We always want everything yesterday. And then also I would say that the advocacy would be, so I said instructional. I said advocacy would be something that happens all the time, just like building relationships and learning the processes. And then also the vision would be to further develop the international baccalaureate program at the middle level. I had several conversations with a variety of, it's amazing how many people you end up knowing from Northville when you are interviewing. And so some of the feedback I got is that that would be an area that we could look into expanding and improving on. And of course, in my 90-day plan, I have a disclaimer. So it says the 90-day plan, as with what my response to this question, it's a 2-year and a 5-year, but with collaboration with you, the board, and then also with the leadership team, that could change. 1 second, there was. So yes, so the 5-year, of course, instruction for all students. Oh, and social emotional learning. I know that you recently added to your policy or to your vision and your mission, a commitment to all statement. And so I imagine that would be something that's ongoing. Diversity, equity, inclusion is ongoing. And so that's never anything, you'll never achieve it 100% because we have new families and new kids. And so that would be another 5-year plan.
Thank you. I'm going to hand it over to Mr. Wong.
Here's a two-part question. Of the needs or wants most important to educators today, what are 1 or 2 that you believe should be accommodated? And the second part is, what is 1 or more that you think cannot be practically done? Shall I repeat it?
Thank you. I think I've got it. The needs and wants of educators. And what are 2 things that I would do, that I would try to accommodate, and 1 that just could not be done. So having bargained 5 contracts and a 1,000,001 letter of agreements over the last few years, a lot of them had to do with teacher retention and recruitment. Yes, teachers, public educators, you deserve the highest salary. The reality is that that's one of the difficult challenges that districts across America face, is that the budget for public education doesn't support the highest salary that you deserve. And that doesn't mean that it's because we don't believe you deserve it. We know you deserve it. We know you deserve it. And we know teaching 25 kids that don't belong to you is a challenge every single day, and to do it well. So that would be the 1 that can't be done. The 2 that can be done is that, yes, you can have your professional development online. And that's just one idea, is that it's never worth, I always say, choose your battles. And so being in human resources, oftentimes I have to deliver the bad news or the news people don't want to hear. And so I'm always looking for opportunities where I can say, hey, yes, we can do this. This is what you wanted. This is what you asked for, and we can do it. And so I feel that giving flexibility, now that we have the capacity to do so via Zoom, doing so. What's another big one?
It says 1 or 2.
1 or 2. I'm good with 1. Pay time off. So thank you. Thank you, Trustee Wong. I appreciate that. Pay time off. People always want paid time off and flexibility with that. And so that's something to explore. Thank you.
Can I just ask, this is just like a 2-worder, but like, what is your tool? What is your evaluation
tool? So you guys use 5 dimensions.
You do
We
5D.
use,
Okay.
we use Danielson. Yeah.
Oh, you do it.
So we use Danielson. It's a framework for teacher evaluation.
Okay. Mr. Wilson.
Thank you. So how have you handled decisions that may have been unpopular with the public? Right. So how have you handled those decisions where you've made a decision that's not popular with the public, but you thought it was necessary to decide in that way. And if you have, specific examples, that would be helpful as well.
So many. Okay. So I'm in this current role, I'm the background. So we strategize and we think about everything, but really the heart of it, because I'm in the community. So I live on an intersection, and when I take my garbage out, there's someone honking to say hi. And so everywhere I go, I have to be able to effectively hear what people are not happy about, and then also be able to respond to it. And so I will say that educate, educate, educate. So I do my best to explain as much as possible and to give as much of the entire picture as possible. And so I can tell you, this is a huge long story, so I won't get into the whole story, but like we went out for a bond in 2019. We had a fierce tax opposition group working against us. The bond failed by about 500 votes. And right now we're exploring going out for another bond, and we're having study sessions. And so we're actually meeting with the group, the fierce tax. So their purpose wasn't necessarily directed at the school district, but then it was when it came time for a bond and for taxes. And that's because they're directing it at the city, but we are all partners in the big picture. And so I educated as much as possible. I explained the different funding sources to the best of my ability. I stay only positive on social media, so I will not engage in anything that's negative on social media, but I will invite people to meet with me and actually talk about it face to face over coffee and not on social media. But it's educating about the different funding sources, for example, in terms of the bond. Educating about our bid process, because all kinds of misinformation and inaccuracies, they start to fly around. And so while we can't control everything, those that we come face to face with and we have the opportunity to talk about it with them, we have to do so.
What about situations where maybe it doesn't feel like we are all partners, right? Where the folks that might be expressing dissatisfaction or really negative, maybe even ugly scrutiny, it doesn't feel like you're all partners. What's your mindset around that kind of situation? How do you handle that?
So it's absolutely to be expected. And I would say that my position right now in the district is I'm faced with the most controversial issues. And it has to always be done with respect. And you got to have as many conversations as possible even if you agree, you have to get to the point that you've discussed it, you've given as much information as you can, and there's going to come a point where you're going to have to agree to disagree. And sometimes the other party doesn't agree to disagree, and they remain angry. And so sometimes you let things settle. You got to just leave it alone for a bit and then circle back around to it to revisit it. Right now, we're working through some challenging things, as always, we always are. And so I was having a conversation earlier today about a specific community group, and that they were upset about some things, and the issues were a bit heated last week. And so I said to my colleague today on the phone, I said, okay, you know what? I said, whether I get the Northville job or not, I want to sit down and meet with this person, with you and with this person. And so I want this person to get to know me. And hopefully we can meet somewhere in the middle, even if we don't meet all eye to eye. So sometimes it's leaving it alone and then going back to it. But don't forget about that person. It's one of those things that you got to let it cool. You disagree, and then circle back around and try to find some common ground and compromise whenever possible. Compromise, like choose your battles. Don't do things just to do things.
Thank you for that. Just finishing a note, Mr. Mcintyre.
So since I'm finance, I'm going to hit you with a finance question, right? Our superintendent is going to be the leader in all areas of the districts, including finances. So my question is, what are the weaknesses or the watch points in maybe our financial model or the Michigan financial model? How would you address those items as a superintendent?
So an $88 million budget, and I know that 86% of that goes towards staff. and benefits as it should. People, we need people. I know that your fund balance is amazing at 26%. I believe the public needs to understand why having that fund balance is so important, and you're not just sitting on a pile of money. And then if that drops below a certain percentage, 5%, and then you become a target, you become red flag for the state. And because funding is so unpredictable, that fund balance is key. And so I'm not going to lie, that was one of the first things I looked at when I began researching the district. The watch points would be that you have to watch your student enrollment. And when you're creating a budget, you start with the student enrollment and the projections. So you have your student enrollment right now, and then you have your projections for next year. And then you have to do projections and estimates on what the state funding will be. Will the per pupil funding increase or decrease? And you have 3 scenarios. You have most likely, no, best case scenario, worst case scenario, and most likely. And then you try to stick with that most likely when you're planning for the following year. And if it ends up being best case, then that's just wonderful. So with your budget, I would be very cautious with, I didn't say this earlier, I would make enrollment a priority as well. Recouping the students that were lost during the pandemic, and that can be done through reaching out to them individually. It's about 250 students. And that can be done. Call 10 families a day. You can knock that out fairly easily, and find out why they haven't returned, and tell them we want them to come back, and have a reception for them, or have something to display and to show all the offerings and remind them of the menu of extracurricular activities that Northville has to offer, the advanced programs, the all the different supports. And so I would say enrollment and in trying to recover that money funding source. I would also say that, like, with the ESSER funds, it's really important that we understand what's a one-time, okay, we have this money, is this a one-time expense, or is this a sustainable expenditure? And so going through all this bargaining, I'm often the one that I work side by side with our executive director of business services. And honestly, he has taught me everything I know about school finance, budgets, and he asks me question after question after question when I come to him with the bargaining plan, and we bargain together. I do the talking, he does the money, but then we powwow in the back. And so asking those questions and then educating, okay, so with the ESSER money, the reason disproportionately funded districts such as Northville got the ESSER money is because the state petitioned the government and said, hey, COVID hit all of us. And I'm sorry, Northville got 1,600,000, something like that. So the public has to understand, and the staff, all the stakeholders, I say the public, I mean all the stakeholders have to understand that this is one-time money. So you can't put it into something that is going to need to be sustained, like compensation. So understanding the differences. So I would say that the enrollment, and then also being aware of the money that stops, because right now we got a little increase, and we have to be aware of which money is going to stop.
Thank you.
Thank you for that. Roland, you're up.
Name something you've taken a stand on in the last 3 years and why. And I just want to sort of delve into like the way you approached it, and the interaction that may be involved, that sort of thing. But
Okay.
name something you've taken a stand on in the last 3 years.
Last 3 years. So the example I was thinking was a bit further back, but so I've taken a stand on, we have so many meetings, right? And with so many different community groups and so many different stakeholders. And it's important to me that people are kind to each other, even when we're disagreeing, that we can disagree, but we should still be nice, and we should still say things in a nice way. And I was in a meeting, it was via Zoom, which doesn't help. And there's about 20 people there, and there was somebody that was coming on pretty strong towards the administrator that was on the meeting. And this was the second meeting I had participated in with this large group. And at some point I stopped and I just said, I'm sorry, but I said it nicely and I said it politely. I just said, that's just not how we do business. And so ideally, I wouldn't have said it on the spot, like in front of everyone, but because I was actually getting uncomfortable for the administrator that was under fire, I felt it was important that like, hey, like, let's put the brakes on that and then circle back around. So ideally, I would address it directly to the person, ideally in a private setting. So it's not to embarrass anyone, and it shows that you have good intent and that you are looking to come together and not divide. Another example I could give you would be, we had a phenomenal summer program last summer, and we're working on another one this year. We are funded quite different than Northville, as you probably know. And we really truly designed this program with the thought of like teachers making an opportunity to make some great money. Everybody should have a 3-day weekend. Like these are the kinds of things that we thought about, and that the professional development was on your, or your planning time was on your own. And so there was a group that, just a small group, that got upset about July 2nd, which is a holiday, that they weren't going to get paid for that one day. And so, we navigated it through the union. But it was challenging, and it bothered me because we really thought about, I know I did, like, what can we do to really say thank you to our teachers? And this was a chance. And again, it was just a few people, but having as many conversations, sending out the message. And this is where the decisions about whether or not you got paid for July 2nd or not, this is where the relationship comes in. Because when you deliver that information and they don't agree with you, but they respect you and they trust you, it'll work itself out. And so everything worked out okay. It was quite a few conversations, and going into this summer, we are just that much smarter and stronger together. So that was 2 examples.
Thank you. I have the next question. The question is, what have you done to move your district toward a more culturally responsive community?
So I'm super excited about this one, and I'm proud of this one. I spearheaded a diversity, equity, and inclusion series for our administrators. Now, it was just too bad that it really had to be through Zoom, but it was last year that they did a 6-part series. And I have to give credit where credit is due. I asked for it to be included as a priority. I knew what needed to be included based on what I was experiencing through student services and through human resources, through those things that were happening. I'm like, this needs to be, wow, this is becoming something more than it was before. And so I got together with the brightest and the best directors that we work with, and each of them I already knew which one was going to do what, because I had worked with them for so long. And we presented this series to the general administrators. Now, that's just one piece. Diversity, equity, and inclusion is something that, sometimes it turns people off, or it can be perceived negatively. And so the key is that we stand in a position this is a diversity of thought. And this starts with us. And it starts with bringing people together, and should always be approached in a manner that brings everyone to belong. And so it's teaching people to reflect on their own biases. And through the training, I can tell you, I catch myself all the time. We all have them. And it's recognizing those biases. And most of the training starts with a self-assessment, a self-evaluation. And that's all about understanding how you think. And as a mother and as a parent, I catch myself when I'm parenting and in the place of education, but it's really just working on how we think and how we process the world around us. And it's that everybody is good, and it's recognizing that, and it's bringing the backgrounds to the forefront in the classroom as well. Did I answer the question?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, I think, so we focused into the question, sort of what have you done? And that can bring in a lot of years and a lot of work. So I'm curious, and you answered the question, but sort of follow-up would be,
Sure.
as you've done that work, and especially in the last couple of years, what has surprised you, or what is your personal sort of aha, any moments like that been for you in that work most recently?
Sometimes I shouldn't say it surprised me, but it is uncomfortable. And it's accepting that such training can be uncomfortable for people. And at times you see you see where people really stand on different issues. And then you still have to love, you don't have to love them, but you don't have to love everything about one person. You could, I'm sure my friends, if you ask them about me or my colleagues, they would say, we love this, this, and this about Maysam, but we don't love. And so it's recognizing that. So I guess what I would say is that I was surprised at times, people's reactions to things, but it's also knowing that that's okay, that they're entitled to what they feel, and that you could still have a great relationship with them.
Thank you. Ms. Mcintyre.
As we're getting to know you, I'd like to know a little bit about what are one or two blind spots that you have in working with others, and how do you accommodate for them?
So one blind spot. So I'm the youngest in my family, and so my blind spots were always pointed out to me loud and clear. And that is why I have a sense of humor. And so I would say that one blind spot, and I find myself saying this to some directors that I work with, is that everyone doesn't have to move as fast as you do. Everyone doesn't have to process as much as you do. If you choose to work on the weekends, everybody else does not choose to work on the weekends. And so sometimes it's stepping back and reminding yourself that somebody is highly competent, but may operate different than you do, and not to be frustrated with that. That would be one. And so I find myself sharing that with other colleagues. And then I'm like, oh gosh, I'm telling her what I apply to myself, or what I need to apply to myself. Another area would be that, not often, but I've developed this through the last 6 years, 7 years, is that I feel the urge to respond, and that's the worst thing you can do. And so I've really, really, really learned to put the brakes on and slow down. And so as a principal, I could give answers before the question was done being asked, right? And so I would do that. And then when I became executive director, I very quickly learned that I had to slow down and sleep on things, because the decisions I was making could truly create liability for the district. They could negatively impact someone. And so I learned to slow down and not respond, and listen more than talk. My sister would still disagree with that.
That's what sisters are for.
Yes, exactly.
Thank you for that. Thank you.
Mhm.
Suzanne.
Yes. So, and you have been to a couple board meetings, as you mentioned. So this community has become accustomed to an incredibly engaged superintendent. And the board is accustomed to a superintendent who provides extraordinary detail in consultation with the board on decisions. So just through your eyes, I'm curious if you think that our existing structures, protocols, processes are sustainable. I'll start with that.
Okay.
Start with that question.
Absolutely. So yes, so thankful that I came and I attended a few board meetings. First and foremost, that's not even a question for me. We have, I don't mean to sound patronizing when I say I loved what I saw. I loved the experience that you were a unified board. You were able to disagree gracefully and respectfully, and still remained unified. Because boy, what that does for a school district, it's priceless. And so if I were to be the superintendent, absolutely. We have several systems in place right now. We have, for example, when we're hiring an administrator, this is just one example to give you some insight. When we're hiring an administrator, after we have 3 rounds of interviews, we have the first round with the administrative team, and then we have parents and staff. And if it's a high school position, then we also have students on their committee as well. That's the second round. And then the third round is the final round with the superintendent and the executive director of instruction for that theater track. And so through that process, I write a memo to the superintendent that includes, this is a list of who applied. These are all the applicants. This is who was selected through the application screening process. These names right here. This is who ranked. So we have like a ranking system. This is how they ranked. And then I send that off. And then after the second round, I give another memo. But this memo includes, this is who served on the parent committee, community committee. This is who served on the staff committee. And that includes, like, we make sure every union has representation on that staff committee. This is who served on the student committee, if there was one for high school. And so that's the level of detail that we get into for an administrative position. We have what's called board briefs, which every single thing that goes on in HR, I mean, like, something happens and I'm like, get it in briefs. And sometimes I'll just put the heading there until I can go back and put the detail in. And I understand, I see you all as 7 personalities, but an 8th collective. So what works for you collectively, and then what works for each person individually. Currently on our board, we have some that will read every single detail that's in board briefs. And then we have others that are like, please just give me the cliff notes. Like, this is way more than what I need, but this is what I need. And so it's no problem. That would be the simple part I would see that as a simple part of the job.
Are there things that you are doing? I was going to ask what changes would you recommend, which I'm happy to ask that question, but, or maybe, given what you are seeing in your current district, are there things when you think about the work between the board and the superintendent that you would want to bring here? Appreciating that you may not know everything that's happening here, but.
Well, one of the first things I saw was on your board agenda. There's at the bottom, the process of you go to this person. And if you can't resolve your concern at this person, then you go to this person, and the chain of command. I thought that was wonderful. I would definitely want to keep that. I value that you use the timer for public comment, and you truly adhere to it consistently. And I spoke briefly with Superintendent Gallagher after the first board meeting, and she shared that you have a process that I believe you vote on the agenda items.
The parking lot, maybe.
The parking lot meeting. Okay. And so I really like that. And then we briefly spoke about how, like, the request for information, it's recognized that you as a board, you recognize that is a ton of time. And while we're willing and happy to give everything and anything you want to know, it does take away from giving to the district. And so when Superintendent Gallagher shared that with me, I was very excited and happy to hear that. And I think that, and we also use incident reports. So I don't, President Lynn, I don't have specifics to how I would change anything with the way you're doing it, but what I do know is that what you're doing sounds very positive and effective.
Thank you for that. Mr. Wilson.
Absolutely. Thank you. So, given the role of superintendent, there would certainly be times where, as much as you hate to do it, you like to say yes, you would unfortunately have to say no. You already know walking into that situation that you're going to have to say no. As you're walking into that conversation with a stakeholder who might be a critic, maybe even a vocal critic of yours, and again that you're going to have to say no to them. How do you walk into that conversation? What's your mindset, and what's more importantly your goal for that conversation, maybe the outcome of that conversation? And if you can cite to specific examples, that would be perfect as well.
my goal for that conversation would be to make sure that that person, even if they're my biggest critic, because I have many, but that comes with the job. And so my goal would be to make sure that that person feels heard, and that they feel heard and they feel valued, and that that maybe they leave with a little more understanding about why the answer is no. And then in that conversation, I will be looking for what I can say yes to, if there's anything. So it might not be exactly what they want, but I'll be looking for some type of compromise, something. And that's going to be through listening to what they're saying carefully and then thinking to myself, okay, so I just had to say no to this, and it's a firm no, and it's not going to change. And they're still going to probably leave upset, but I'm going to be listening for opportunities that I can give them something, even if it's not everything that they want. I can think of one example is over this year has been different. And I had more than one teacher come to me privately and say, I basically want to negotiate their salary. And it's not something you can do. And so I explained that over, but I listened, and one teacher left and became a nurse on leave and then came back, and because she just missed teaching and loved teaching, and gosh, isn't that what we want? And if I could have given her more, I would have, but I explained to her as much as possible. And I made sure that she understood that I was so thankful that she chose to come back to teaching, and I explained why I couldn't just adjust her salary. And now, like when I see her, or if I'm in her building, I make sure to go to her classroom to see how she's doing. And so, even if I'll say this, she wasn't necessarily a critic, but even when it's a critic, you make a point to go there and still try to interact with them at a later time as well. Trying to think of other examples, but maybe one will pop up in a bit.
That's helpful. Do you want to follow up, or are you next? You might be next.
I'm next, yeah.
Thank you.
So we already talked about Northville is a tight community, right? But we also have high expectations. I guess it comes from being number one, right? But so this is a question about visibility in the district, right? How would you ensure that you're visible within the district? And that means kind of everything. Any specific things that you would specifically do? And then after you answer that, maybe you can give some examples of what you've done within your current district.
Okay. So I touched on some of these earlier, but I'll circle back around that I would definitely do, like, the calendar's got to be golden. So it's got to be in your calendar to make sure that happens. It can't be like, I'll get there when I get there. No, it has to be that, you're meeting with the administrative council, and I'm going to assume that there's already these processes in place, and that Superintendent Gallagher has systems in place. And so of course I would learn those, but it's that you meet at a regular time and you bring your team together, you bring the team together at a regular time consistently. That's one. And then also getting into buildings is like, that should just be part of, that would still be in my calendar because I'm a calendar person. But I would want to make sure that I was visiting buildings on a regular schedule. And visiting buildings doesn't mean that staff and parents have the opportunity to sit and talk to you. And so those coffee with the superintendent or the chatting with the superintendent, those have to be scheduled intentionally and consistently. And then it's also attending every one of the events. So I know that there was an event that the Ammerman, for the fundraising for the playground, which is just amazing that they did 100. I'm like, go 200,000. They fundraised 170,000, which is just beautiful. And so going to the garage that night when they were having their fundraiser at the garage, going to their craft show, going to Northville, the open house at Northville High School, going to Cook School and visiting when they're doing their community-based instruction and they're going to the different community places, join them. Now, I don't know, I know that there's transportation challenges all across the state, but I know that there's a bus that runs. I mean, hop on the bus with them and go experience what they experience with them. There's so many ways. And in my district, I can say some of the things that I've done. Something we added this year is that historically it was chatting with the soup. So we have 35 buildings. And so we would just sign up and we would go with our superintendent, and we would have like a slot for parents, a slot for staff during their regular staff meeting time. And then we would have a slot for parents a little bit later in the evening. And so we would take turns signing up. This year we added that we like chatting with central office. And so each executive director, we don't have an assistant superintendent, we have executive directors. So each of us took a team. We did it like a football draft, who was going to get who. And luckily I got the security, the security person on mine, which is great. We have wonderful people, so all the teams were good. So we went to the buildings, and then we picked 5 buildings each, and we went to their staff meeting. And really, there was no agenda. That was the beautiful part about it, is there was no agenda. The staff drove the agenda, and they asked all the questions that they wanted, and they could see us face to face instead of through email. And I felt really, really good about those 5. It was only 5 buildings. That's why I say like it's so appealing to me, because I'm like, oh, I could get everywhere like this, like I could do this. So hopefully that's just one example.
A follow-up question, which is always difficult, right? I see 3 young kids. I'm assuming these are your kids.
Yes, it is. Thank you.
How do you find that balance with the need or maybe the want to participate in all the community events without necessarily leaving your kids behind, right? You have to find a balance. So give me your
Absolutely.
thoughts on that.
Yeah, absolutely. So they're a little older than that picture though, but I love that you knew that they were mine. They're my good luck charms. So if you look at some of the pictures in there, when we were campaigning for the bond, they walked blocks and blocks and blocks with me, knocking on doors, and they participated. Now they will not be able to participate in everything, and I recognize that, and they're not able to now as well. I have a wonderful support system, and really I have a wonderful husband. And we are quite a cohesive team that works together, and it's give and take. And I have a wonderful group of babysitters that they're the kids that have a lot going on in their lives because they're such great kids. But my children get the opportunity to learn from an audiologist, a chef. Each sitter brings something new, and I'm very comfortable with that. And so I haven't felt, sure, it's a balance, and it's planning, major planning. And so to date, it's been okay.
Okay, thank you.
I wanted to follow up on Mr. Wilson's question in a little bit different way, which is, you talked about those moments, understanding you're a calendar person, but
Mhm.
some of those meetings where maybe there isn't an agenda, like a teacher evaluation or some other agenda, that takes you to a classroom. If you thought back from today, when would be the last time that you were in a classroom, K-8, say, without an agenda, just a stopping in or checking in?
I was in a ton of buildings for March's Reading Month, but even though I was in the buildings for that purpose, I made several stops to other classrooms and to see other people. I did see, so that was not last week, it was about 2 weeks ago.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, I have the last question that's sort of a question for you, and then we'd love to hear if you have any questions for us. But we want to hear why you think that you would be the best candidate for us to pick.
So I'm going to say I more than usual. So please, humbly speaking, I am the best candidate because not only do I have 15 years of all instruction, success with instruction and with students and with building level practices, research-based best practices. I feel that I've mastered instructionally what a superintendent needs to understand. But I've also, in the last 7 years, mastered the non-instructional side, which is the human resources, student services, which student services is somewhat instructional as well, budget and finance, and advocacy. So those are areas that I would have never had the opportunity to master if I stuck only on the instructional side of education. And so that would be my number one reason why I believe I'm a good fit and a great fit for Northville. I will just mention that after all the research I've done, if I got the job, I would definitely be raising my family in Northville. And so it's somewhere I want to raise my kids. It's somewhere that I definitely would want to raise my children. I'm also a good fit because my leadership style is flexible. So I'm highly collaborative, and the work that I do right now in my district, I overlap with every single department. And so every single department I have some type of collaboration with, and we always joke and say, whatever doesn't fit somewhere else ends up with me. And so my ability to collaborate, sometimes collaboration slows you down, but slowing down is really, really an important part of the process. And so I would take the collaborative approach to leadership over the authoritative approach any day. However, there are times that situations present themselves where you do have to shift into being I would be confident being a taking a directive approach to something when it's appropriate. But that should be like my secondary leadership style as needed. I have absolutely no problem having difficult conversations. And I really, really believe that being direct, but kind, not direct in a rude manner, but being direct and having those difficult conversations, oh my, how much good comes out of them. So being uncomfortable for those first few minutes are well worth the fruit of your labor, and that uncomfortableness pays off later. And so I will always approach things directly and authentically. And I am also extremely solution-based. So I don't go into something, and I like those around me to be solution-based. And so I don't go into something thinking about all the reasons why it can't work. I go into it and I say, these are all the reasons we're going to make this work. We don't want this, you could have a million things, even in my personal life, I'm the same way, that we could look at it and we could say, oh, there's all these reasons why this can't work. No, we're going to go into it and we're going to look at it and say, why is it going to work? And then we're going to navigate. I'm very comfortable with delegating, but I don't believe that delegating is, hey, this is yours, take it, run with it, and I don't want to hear about it again. No, delegating, effective delegating is, please, let's look at this together and go ahead and get started on it, and let's touch base throughout, and let me guide you, and let's troubleshoot together when you get stuck. That's delegating. I have no problem delegating. I'm very comfortable doing so. So my delegation. Oh, and I'm a people person, of course. So I enjoy people, and I naturally want to be around people, and I want to be accessible, and I want to be visible in the community. I really do enjoy like all the events that go on. Like you'll see, I'm not a golfer, but you'll see I'm golfing in one of those pictures with our Ed Foundation. And I believe that investing time in people is essential for the culture of the entire district, and that the culture starts with us. It starts with the top leadership. And so if you don't have culture and you don't have a solid relationship, what got us through COVID? Our relationships, that's what got us through COVID. What has gotten me through every difficult decision that I've had to make is the relationships I had with people. So even as a principal, when I had to handle a private matter, personnel matter, and I couldn't tell everyone, this is the whole story. Even if they were upset with me for the moment, because we had a relationship, because they knew I cared about them, and because they trusted me, we got through it, and we're still together. And so I'm definitely, my foundation is based on people and relationships. And of course, the network I have in Michigan. I've been super fortunate to establish a network, and I will further develop that network as well.
Thank you so much. That was great.
you.
I think that's our last question, but we, as I said, have would be interested if you have any questions for us.
So ironically, you kind of asked me my question for you, which is where do you want to see the district in 5 years? And I'm very familiar through my research of all the advanced offerings that Northville Public Schools has to offer. I mean, I have a ton of questions, but I don't think it's right now. Like, I want to know, how do you want to do this? How would you like to, do you want me to stay after this meeting? Or after this interview? But really my question is about the long-term goals of the district, and whether or not that's something that you want to speak to now is up to you, obviously.
Yeah, I mean, it's a big, huge question, and one that we probably have 7 voices on. Maybe one way to address it is that, and I can sometimes get a little ahead of it or excited to think about more than just words, but we do have a strategic plan, as I know you spoke to it in your video in a lovely way. And then how that planning has worked in your own experience. I would say that the foundation and the grounding would be from our strategic plan and the 5-year goals that we adopt, and then the annual focus areas. And I probably could guess that every single one of us would say that we're not satisfied with number 1. We want to be number 1 forever. I don't know what's better than number 1 prime, number 1.
Number 1 with a greater gap between number 1, number
Right.
2.
Maybe I can take on that and kind of address it, right? When you're number 1, there's only one place to go, that's down, right? And that's not an acceptable proposition. And so the question is, we have, grown over the last 10 or 11 years to get yourself to a position, but if you're not moving forward, you're falling behind. And so the question we need to look at is, how do we stay ahead of the game? How do we engage with our changing community makeup? And how do we continue to drive our kids forward in education so they can be successful human beings, in whatever success means to them, right? That doesn't mean everybody has to be a doctor at U of M or go to U of M or whatever, but success has different meanings. But giving kids the tools to be successful in how they define it, right? And we can't be on our laurels, right? So what we're really looking for is, we've had a great superintendent who really helped us move the needle to here. But we can't stay here, right? We have to be looking at, how do you get better? And every incremental gain at this point becomes harder. And so we need someone who can be visionary. But again, we don't want to sit on our laurels. How do we continue to move that needle? And how do we move it for every individual student out there? That's just one piece. I'm sure there's others.
Yeah, Roland.
Education is really a process, and it's dynamic. It's not static. It's not like learning the periodic table. And so I think that that's what we have to concentrate on in terms of, we think that we know what the best practices are, but, are we continuing to, hone that as a matter of education and science? So innovation and best practices, and what it's going to look like in the next 5-10 years.
I want to give Angela a chance if she can't really flag that.
Thank you, Ms. Prescott. I think it's just really a hybrid of what Mr. Mazurek and Mr. Wong had to say. It's sustainability on maintaining our excellence, but also what is the future of education, and how does that look through interfaces of different technologies and the way the world has just changed even in the past 2 years. And what have we gained from that? What is it going to look like to keep making improvements, making strides, but also remaining sustainable?
The one thing I think that is interesting that we don't talk a lot about, but that worries me immensely, is that the point you made about coming and seeing the board operate, which I commend you for doing.
Thank you.
Good, doing homework. I did the same thing when I was actually appointed to the board. There's a story, but anyway, and then I was subsequently ran, but I would not have put my name in the ring if I had seen people behaving ways that sometimes people behave on boards that are, whether it's townships or school boards, because life is too short to be doing this instead of oars rowing in the same direction. And I think one challenge that a superintendent has is answering to 7 people that change, and few, if any, of whom may have any teaching or educational experience, but who have a legitimate voice and a lens on a community. And if they begin to go sideways at each other, this district cannot maintain where it's at. It won't fight fiscally. It won't whatever. So I think, how does a superintendent, like a vision for long-term is how the professionals who run the schools can help make sure that the leadership is well oiled and functioning, because you can't control who's elected. So it's a little bit of a give and take and a process and relationship building. And that's, I think, incredibly important to long-term, or even just in times that are divisive and in times where COVID maybe brought it out, or political storms that are bigger than local bring it out. How do you maintain a professional collegiality that then serves to keep us moving forward? And if that doesn't happen, what can a superintendent do? So I think those are also aspects that, I would throw into the conversation. I don't know if you have other thoughts, those who haven't.
Go on, Lindsay.
The way I think about it, I think it's such a great question. I don't have specific things, but what I kind of envision us here as kind of standing on the shoulders of giants a little bit, right? So we've had a fantastic superintendent, Colt team, boards in the past. I go back to where Jim was, whenever it was 10 or so years ago, when they faced, financial crises and things like that. And where we are today is because we've had these giants, and it's team. It's not any particular person. So my, I guess, vision or wish is that 10 or 15 years from now, a similar set of folks will be sitting around talking about how they're looking for, their next team member, whoever it is, and they're standing on the shoulders of the giants that got this district to where it is 10 or 15 years ago from now. I don't want to take sort of an incremental, let's just maintain where we are approach. I don't know the specific steps or the specific goals, but that's what my kind of wish is for 5, 10, 15 years out, that will collectively be viewed as kind of a giants, and they'll be standing on our shoulders and trying to do that, take us that next step further.
I think about it through the lens of, I do think, despite having, spent the last 2 years dealing with some of the stuff that we dealt with, when we think about number one, I also think about number one through the lens of not just the success of our students and what that means for our staff members, et cetera, but also number one in terms of innovation. So to your point, right? Like I think about, and I know this is a very blanket statement, but there have been so many times that we continue to do education the same that we've been doing it for so many years. And I think the past few years, I don't want to discount all of the other innovations that have, but the past few years, I think, have really catapulted all of us to have to think about maybe education is not, maybe we can take risks that perhaps we haven't been willing to take before. And so I think about what that looks like. And, we just, I don't know if you were here, but we just a couple of weeks ago, I think you might've been here hearing our teachers talk about some incredibly innovative work that they're doing and how they are facilitators in the classroom. And it really kind of turns the whole idea of teaching on its head, but in a way that, our teachers were thrilled about it, right? Like it leaves them still fully doing the work that they love with students, but in a very different way. And so I think about some of the things that we've been hearing about and learning about over the past few years. And what does that mean in terms of how do we turn the whole idea of education on its head in a way that our students are still incredibly successful, but we are being wildly innovative. And when I say wildly innovative, I also don't mean that we are like trying 28,000 different things at the same time. But how do we take what we've learned over the past handful of years and take some risks that we were kind of forced to take in the past few years as well?
Thank you.
And I would add that obviously we do an amazing job in instructing kids, right, teaching kids, but I think the pandemic has shown us that there's also mental health gaps, right, that do prevent the strong learning for all of the students, right? And I think that continuing to merge those, our great instructional practices that are data-based and meet all of our goals, but there are some kids that are missing somehow or missing some of those pieces, not always getting what they need. And I think we've got great MTSS systems. We've got lots of awesome, new staff coming on board that really support that. But I do think that mental health piece is kind of the next part that is going to be really important in our world and in Northville as well. Even though we are a really good looking community on the outside, our data looks beautiful. And that is huge credit to the families and the staff and the students, of course. And there's some parts that aren't always visible in that data.
That's right.
There are other opportunities than what we may consider social emotional too, that I often comment on because that aren't quantifiable on a MEP or a NWA, like grit and resilience and problem solving and being able to function in groups. And so I think to Lindsay, to so many of these points, are we going to measure those someday? Are we going to find a way? And will we be at the top of that? So if we're leaping forward in the ways that we think about things, is it leaping out of, only looking at test scores and being number one there, which is great to be, but and those are other opportunities. So, does the board feel like we're good to move on? I know you have a lot of questions and you're certainly welcome to stay.
Thank you.
I'm sure you have a zillion questions.
Do you have one more burning
Anything-
question?
I would,
else?
actually, I don't have another question for right now, but I do want to say that something that trustee Mcintyre said about SEL, the social emotional learning, and it didn't come up earlier, but one of the things that areas I would focus on and that I think is often maybe not forgotten, but doesn't get the attention it deserves would be the social emotional well-being of the high achievers. And so I did a ton of research on that over the last 4 weeks. And it's astounding. And so I think that would be another area that I would want to bring to make it another priority. And then also just continue raising the bar. And that in my closing is just it touches on what you said, is that I will never accept stagnant. I will never accept status quo, or we're doing it this way because this is how we've done it for 100 years. It's not my style one bit, and I'm not comfortable with it. And it's like, as a teacher, I would never teach the exact same lesson. Even within a day, that lesson might change through the day. And my commitment would be to raising the bar and continuing to network, because there are so many top-notch opportunities to learn what is globally. I'm looking at the Foster Learning Profile, the number one on your strategic plan, and globally what's happening and how can we apply that here. And I love that. I think you said it, that, not just a piece of this and a piece of that. No, it's got to be focused and strategic implementation of that. So you have my commitment, and you also have my commitment that if I'm selected to be the superintendent, is that I will always go above and beyond to make sure that we work in partnership, so that I will do my best to prepare you and continue preparing you and educating you so that you can govern the district to the best of your ability at all times. And I recognize that is an essential function. I'm sure Superintendent Gallagher does a wonderful, fabulous job. And I recognize just know that you have my commitment to do that.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Great job.
My
Really
pleasure.
appreciate
Thank
your time.
you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Coming.
Why don't we take five or so minutes?
5 or so minutes, yeah.
All right.
Thank you so much. This is wonderful. I know, the cords are dangerous.
Thank you.